Good morning, and apologies for a slight delay there. But we were
It's all
having a
my
few
fault.
technical issues. No, it's not your fault. It's technology. It's time for an iPhone, Graham. It's time for an iPhone.
Didn't what you give your kids to play with, Richard?
Oh no! My daughter has an Android phone, and I've got an iPhone. So yeah, no, not doesn't work around that way around.
Sorry, folks. It's my
Anyway,
fault this morning. Technical Luddite. Carry on, Richard.
hey, look, I think simply putting on some headphones has improved the quality dramatically. So that's a bonus.
And my good looks as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. Now, look, welcome to episode 38 of the AutoTalk Weekly Wrap. We have some good, solid industry news for you coming in a moment, but first we're going to tell you and show you a little bit of what we were up to over the last, not the last few days, but the last few days, a few days ago. Graham and I, in my continuing quest to turn Graham into the world's biggest EV lover, went and drove an LDV MIFA 9, so a electric people mover, from Northland to Christchurch. There's a couple of times now we've done trips like this. They are a little bit of fun, and yeah, it was a bit of fun. I'm going to chuck up a little bit of drone footage from Kaikoura in the background. What a pretty part of the world. We did, about 1,200 kilometres. We only had to charge. We DC charged 3 times, probably could have made it 2, and charged at our hotels twice. Now, part of the reason for doing this is I'm putting together a bit of a story for our sister magazine, EVs and Beyond, about ways you can kind of reduce stress when you're driving an EV this summer, because it's going to be crazy busy at the chargers this year. Our industry has done it probably slightly too good a job of pumping out electric vehicles onto the roads, and the infrastructure hasn't perhaps kept up the best. And so we did this video to kind of show it could be done and give a few tips. And yeah, it was a bit of fun. I think alongside that, ChargeSet's putting out a campaign about the summer of sipping. So, like we've said, charging early, charging short. Graham, I'm guessing this one was a bit of a mind blower for you as to where electric cars are in regards to pumping out those miles.
Yeah, it snuck up on me, this one. I didn't really know what to expect. I sort of came to it with an open mind. But to journey from Auckland, as I did, down to Christchurch, and have as few range issues as we had, to literally be stopping and charging for 20 minutes, that for me was a bit of a newbie. And when I explained it to my friend on the socials as we were on the way, that we'd literally charge for a maximum of about an hour from Auckland to Wellington, and got into Wellington with a couple of 100 Ks in the tank, so to speak, they were absolutely amazed. And so here's the thing. I think EV technology is now moving faster than people's perception of it. And we're at a point now where it's actually becoming quite good and quite usable. Honestly, I was really impressed. The vehicle's one thing. The whole concept of being able to travel in an electric vehicle, I certainly had some mind-changing going on.
Yeah, and I think our total charge time for the North Island was a bit over 1 hour, 1 hour
Yeah.
5, 1 hour 10. But I think we overcharged on the trip by about 15 minutes. So it was really about 50 minutes, probably realistically in total, we could have done to get to Wellington. But there's no point in risking it.
Well, no one puts $10 in their tank of their gas within their tank, knowing they're going to need $9 of it to get to Wellington. That's not how it's done either. So this is just real world stuff.
Yeah.
Look
So
at
that was the Kaikoura coast is stunning. That was a bit of fun. I enjoyed that, and we've got to come up with some different plans. Maybe something about that true blue Mustang Mark E, Graham. I may have nudged Ford New Zealand about doing something in that.
Open mind. I'm your guy. I'm the Mustang guy, right? So change my mind.
Exactly. So if anyone's in the comments, what are your guys' takes on EV road tripping? I mean, have you ever tried one? Do you think EVs are getting there in regards to road trips, or do you think that you'd rather go and put a tank of diesel or something in something else, or petrol at great expense, and go for a summer road trip? And also, I guess, where is your summer road trip this year? Tell us. We'd love to know. so we can mock you for it.
Well, my summer
Right.
road trip in Henderson right now would be if we can get out of Lincoln Road. We're doing pretty well, I think, at the moment. I'm pretty sure that's going to be the eternal parking lot of doom until sometime mid-January. Traffic's already got really bad out there. I mean, really bad. If you are in the North Island and Auckland particularly, be noticing at the moment.
Is that going to the mall or is that something else?
Oh, they're all going to Costco, I'm sure.
Oh,
Or
never
just
been.
leaving
It'll
West
be a
Auckland.
while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be a while.
Right, let's do what we are here for and share some news. So, of course, that is the lovely autotalk.co.nz you are looking at there. And if I just find the right tab that I need.
Technology at work.
Lots of great news up there at the moment that you can check out. Also,
Yeah.
don't forget to check out our quality advertisers. These, look, these guys support us all year, and I'll just do a quick note to our foundation sponsors who've been around for a long time: AdTalk Edge, Nichibo, AutoHub, Motor Central, Vins, AutoSure, Better Finance, and MotorWeb. Some great guys there, of course. Auto Terminal NZ, Ports of Auckland, and Tremie Motors
Here we
are
are
industry
again.
supporters. Yeah.
There's some good stories today.
Yep, there are some good stories today. So we are going to run through a few. First, we'll just note that since our last chat, the December issue of AutoTalk magazine came out. Again, some great stories there. A lot of coverage from AutoTalk Live. Great photo there of the cover. Nice to put some dealers on the cover, even if it's their backs. We've got a whole lot of stuff there. I said a run through right through AutoTalk Live. We focus on particularly on the session from Daniel Morris from Deloitte. We talk a bit about Two Cheap Cars, NZ FinTech Group going under, which we discussed last week. Look at Disputes Tribunal, the Brisbane Port Strike, Financial Services Federation's annual awards, the usual roundup of statistics and a whole pile of columns. I think the columns and the opinion is one thing that AutoTalk has that just is really stand out in this trade. It's all very well knowing what the news is, but getting expert analysis on it, I think, is really important, and we've got lots of that. Let's click on to the actual first news story of the week. And that is an unregistered motor vehicle trader convicted and fined $8,000. And good, you may say, but I'm a bit, a person who sold more than 44 vehicles in a 12-month period, more than 7 times the limit for unregistered individuals, has been convicted and fined for breaching the Motor Vehicle Sales Act. Khan David Ratcliffe, an unregistered motor vehicle trader, pleaded guilty and was subsequently sentenced to an $8,000 fine in order to pay $130 court costs and $400 solicitors costs. Individuals are able to sell up to 6 vehicles in a 12-month period without registering as a motor vehicle trader. Motor vehicle traders register at Duncan Connor says. Under Section 95 of the MVSA, those found breaking the law could face fines of up to $50,000 or an individual, or $200,000 as a company. It was an MB investigation that got it. He was only charged with the one count of trading motor vehicles or being unregistered. The registrar is saying that Facebook Marketplace is a common platform for unregistered motor vehicle traders to sell their vehicles. I'm taking a wild guess that's because TradeMe actually has some fairly sophisticated things in place to try and spot this kind of stuff. That's Facebook Marketplace is free. Now, I have a bit of a hot take on this one.
I can guess that, Richard.
And that is a lousy fine. And I would argue that falls barely in the ranks of cost of business for someone like that. Because,
it's a bargain.
So I pulled up my calculator, and if I go $8,000 divided by 44 equals, that is $181 per vehicle.
I tell you what, I think I'm just going to go and deregister as a dealer, going to sell cars via Facebook Marketplace and cop the fine every single time because it is cheaper and it's a better business decision to do them illegally and get slapped with a wet bus ticket every year or so. That's great. That is actually a really good business model right there. Don't register. Don't pay your insurance. Don't pay your licensing costs. Add $180 on top to every vehicle you sell, and I'll bet there's a dealer in the country right now not thinking, man, that is a really smart financial decision. What a fraud. That really is. And I don't know what's worse, that the guy got pinged for 45 vehicles, which, let's face it, in the Facebook land is not a whole lot. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Or the fact that somehow the good people at NB that brought this prosecution think $8,000 is a deterrent. The guy right now is sitting there thinking, well, let's do that again.
Well, I mean, would you be surprised if GST was being paid on those vehicles, Graham?
Am I surprised if anything? GST, income tax, any CGA protection, any protection about whether the vehicle's been previously imported as damaged, or it's deregistered, or it's got finance owing. You've got nothing. And here's this guy charging $180 effectively, because that's his fee to sell vehicles, thanks to the courts. Nothing. Of course not. This is Facebook Marketplace. It is lawless.
I also wouldn't be surprised if his wife or brother-in-law or whoever else pops up trading tomorrow.
Yep, sister, cousin, brother. We've seen it all before. It's actually really disappointing. And I think the industry, by and large, is looking at this, waking up, seeing the result, and thinking, what's the point? And if you're one of those dealers that keeps a bit of an active eye on your local area and who's trading on the side of the road and who's got 15 cars parked up there with the same cardboard signs, my local guy, he does balloons. I don't know, that's his thing, there's balloons. Every car has balloons. You're thinking, what's the point of reporting it? What's the point?
Mm-hmm. Look, on the plus side, at least MB seems to be doing something again rather than inspecting mask rules, I guess. Because they've been it feels like they haven't been doing a huge amount in the last couple of years. They've been slightly distracted. Right. Yeah. Yes. Let's move on to another bit of news, and that is VIA's moved on from its exemption fight. VIA says it's moving on from its work pushing Waka Kotahi to provide an exemption for the clean car standard for vehicles delayed by a port strike in Brisbane, but intends to not let the situation happen again. As first reported by AutoTalk, up to 4,000 vehicles could arrive too late to be complied by December 31, opening up for penalties under the new system. Chief Executive David Vincent says the association met with... something's happened there in the typing. We met with a firm no to an exemption. Just this morning at our regular industry working group with a big team from the NZTA, we made a strong representation today for an application for exemption for vehicles that are going to be delayed and miss the cut, Vincent says. There are precedents for ministers to issue exemptions in cases of force majeure. Equally, they gave a very firm, definitive answer, he reports. They say there is no ability to give an exemption under the legislation, and they have done data work that shows on the basis of recent import mixes, the industry will be in credit. I would argue that's a bit irrelevant, because what does that do for the individual dealer? Like, that basically penalises one guy down the road selling Aquas versus one guy down the road selling Ford F-150s.
I got to say, I actually thought that was a bullshit comment, and a minister or a ministry or other officials should know better than that. Exactly. It's cold comfort to know that the industry in general may not necessarily be affected. If you're the guy that's actually got a business model with higher, heavier vehicles, that you had done everything you could to make sure they fall within the January 1st cutoff, given how rapidly that came up on us, no. I don't know. Could VIA have pursued it further? Is there a legal challenge that could have been taken? I don't know. And I'm not privy to these things anymore either, so I really can't comment on it, apart from that's disappointing on a number of different levels.
Yeah, I've got two issues with this. From one side, this feels like it happens every time. There's always something, and I kind of feel like there's an element of the industry perhaps needs to start realizing that a little bit more, and I may get some hate for that.
No, I think you're wrong on that count, Richard. There was, when we used to have the cutoff at compliance or date cutoffs for the vehicle to be complied and things. Since the industry worked forward to a border check basis, it eliminated 99% of those issues, where you literally had the border checkpoint in Japan. Everyone understood it. It meant that all the other events that are out of your control, because let's face it, where things go wrong is generally after the border check. It's a combination of shipping or port strikes or transporter issues or a compliance workshop issue or shortage of staff. And those are the things that you genuinely, as an importer, can't control. But you've got to say you've got a 99.9% chance of being able to control your purchasing in Japan and get the vehicle to the wharf on time. And if you can't do that, I've got no sympathy for you. Everything forward from that point is out of your hands as the person who buys the vehicle, making what you believe at the time to be a sound financial decision. And if you argue that you should be thinking about it earlier, well, what's earlier? Is it 2 months? Is it 3 months? Is it 4 months? I don't know, because you've got this open-ended time frame to work to.
Good rant there, Graham. Hear me out though. And look, I had a quick search for it there, but I can't do it in the middle of the thing. If I recall correctly, and I'm not sure if it was when we went to the 3-digit emission codes or we went to ESC, and these were situations where it was a border check situation. There was a shortage of trucks or a truck driver's strike in Japan on one of those, and we had this exemption situation, or this call for an exemption situation again. I don't know. I mean, there's an element to of how, where do you draw the line in regards to genuine vehicles that have been genuinely delayed by stuff, by simply something out of their control, and people pushing to get this stuff through and over the line early, congesting the system, and there being some, congestion around the edges. I think I don't believe. I think in this case it's a rare case of it's relatively genuinely the industry is an innocent party as such. But the argument would go was, well, if it's really that time critical and you've got a system that does have delays on a regular basis, then should people have stopped buying 2 weeks earlier? I don't know. I'm trying to be a bit challenging on the situation here. I think it is 80% in all these situations. It is 80% force majeure. 20%, I think maybe people could start accounting for that risk management a little bit, I guess you'd call it. But at the same time, these are traders, these are entrepreneurs. Often there is a commercial advantage to purchasing late in these situations because some people do take the risk out and step out of the market, which can affect pricing, and certainly has in the past. I believe when we shifted to electronic stability control, there were people who deliberately bought in the market very late in the piece, attempting to get stuff squeezed through in time.
Well, that's why you have a date line, though. I mean, it's either a date or it's not a date.
Yeah.
So arguing that they bought late, because don't forget ESC was a border check. Okay. So if you bought late and you have the ability in your mind to get the vehicle through to the system to be exported by that point, that's your business call to make. You've got a very specific date to work to. And like I said, those are things, as the person who buys the vehicle and is ultimately the recipient of the circumstances at the other end when it comes to compliance, you can make those decisions accordingly. Now, I'll give you a good example of that. Frontal impact was the last time we had a definitive New Zealand compliance date to work, actually an arrivals date to work to in New Zealand. And we had a shipment of vehicles that were delayed by about 4 days, and they landed on, I think it was the 31st of March cutoff, and the boat got in on the 3rd or the 4th of April. And we lost 5 or 6 different vehicles, and we were small cheese by compared to a lot of them, because the boat just arrived late, couldn't get them off, therefore they didn't qualify under the frontal impact. Those vehicles ended up being scrapped. Now, we were upset about it. We didn't go having a where to anybody else about it because we had taken the commercial risk to do that. There was a definitive date to work to, and we knew this process. Everything else up to that point afterwards has been based on a compliance date, which gave you the ability to at least build in the flexibility the industry needs. And for God's sake, if you've not been living under a rock for the last 3 years, you know that globally we do have logistics issues. But like I said, does that mean you push stuff out for a month? Is it 2 months? Is it 3 months? Who knows? At least under a compliance date, you had a definitive rule to work to.
I think it's a risk-reward situation. And in a lot of these cases, look, I think you're right. I think what you said, what I'm trying to say there is that people do know and expect there to be, not know and expect, but know and understand there are logistics delays. And so you take the risk on how close to the deadline you want to push the button on that car adoption.
Well, then if that argument is the case, then Richard, then we should have been making these decisions before the legislation was even announced.
Well, I guess that is another factor in that, and it adds to that risk-reward situation yet again, is that up until the last minute. Some people were probably still banking on a delay. And yeah, so as I said, I do believe that this is 80% force majeure, 80% on the poor structuring of this, but I still believe that for some vehicles coming in, it was a risk reward call as to whether they would be shipped so late. But yeah, that's my take on it. I'll probably get some heat for it.
Yep.
Anyway.
We disagree.
I think it's less so on this one, but I certainly think on some of the other ones where we've had court exemption calls before, it was probably more that case. But I think there is still an element of it. Personal opinion.
Welcome to car dealing. Risk and reward, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Now, on to an interesting one. Dealership's TikTok ad raises eyebrows. Now, this one is... I was going to put a note in here. Dealership TikTok ad raises eyebrows. So, a Christchurch car dealership appealing to beneficiaries and dole bludgers, in quotes, has caught the attention of the Race Relations Commissioner. Wholesale Motors owner Tyson Adams features in the TikTok video advertising a 7-seat Mazda Primacy. Calling all beneficiaries and dole bludgers, have we got the next minivan for you, he says as the video kicks off. The Mazda Primacy will look effing good humming through the KFC drive-through at night. The 42-second clip also includes references to Wins Lovers and Living Off Auntie Cindy. So far, it has received more than 80,000 views. Yeah.
Buy that man a beer.
Oh.
I think the galling parts about this, I've got a couple of takes on this, as you knew I might. Number one was Meg Food must be a great person to have at parties. What a fun person they are. But I thought that his comments that you shouldn't be buying a vehicle off a business like this, I thought that stepped right over the line in terms of his ability to make a commercial judgment about a business. And I thought that was just plain wrong, saying to people they shouldn't buy off this particular business. That's not his business. His business is to comment on what he sees, perhaps with the what he would see as being the inappropriateness of the particular commercial, not to tell people they shouldn't buy off that particular business. Me, honestly, if you look around you at the marketing that's going on at the moment, not for cars, but all sorts of consumer items. Now, what's the difference between this and the energy provider? It's a tribally owned or a tribally managed energy provider that's popping up on Facebook all the time talking about a final distribution that uses a plate of KFC to divide up how your energy is distributed and ultimately end up at your whare with your KFC. Is that okay? Are we allowed to talk about KFC? These people have made it really clear, this dealer. They're selling particular vehicles to a particular marketplace. And yeah, look, there's some stereotyping, but sigh. Your turn.
Right. Okay. Now, here's the thing with this, and that is that it's a bit of a copy. Now, the question... Now, I don't know this, but people are very aware of the well-known TikTok creator now. I can never pronounce it right. Ketis Hayes Vale. So he became obviously fairly famous doing his videos for Trust Motors in Auckland. He's now gone out on his own and consulting to other dealerships to make these kind of videos. He has had some great success, and if you actually jump on the Herald today, I believe, there's a story about his work with Portage Cars in Auckland. They've obviously done a very similar style to what he originally was doing. It is quite funny, but they're generally good-hearted and not necessarily being negative and offensive. And I believe in the case of Ketis' stuff originally, he generally took the piss out of amusing stereotypes, ute drivers, V8 owners, masculinity, blah, blah, blah. I do think this one was a smidge tone deaf, and possibly they got carried away with either I'm not sure if Kiedis was involved in this and assisting them in replicating the style, or whether they're just trying to replicate it full stop. I do think this was a bit tone deaf. I do think that it pitched in on some probably slightly too negative stereotypes and certainly some race-baited stereotypes. There's a line. I think you can be funny, but I think you just don't be mean. And I do think this one perhaps went a little bit mean. And the irony being is it probably appealed more to people who looked negatively at the stereotypes was pushing on rather than the people who they probably actually wanted to sell the car to. Yeah, but still, I think we can be a little bit funny, but I think, yeah, bit of tone, a little bit of tone.
The irony here is, I suspect they're going to sell a lot of vehicles over this commercial, and ironically, I think it will sell vehicles to the very market that they're taking the piss out of, because we sort of sometimes underestimate Kiwis' ability to laugh at ourselves. We have a sector of our society that likes to get offended at absolutely everything. And I take on board your points, Richard, about this, okay? I'm not giving it the grey and green light. But I also think that we've underestimate the fact that the target market for those commercials are probably going to have a bit of a laugh, and they've just put themselves on the map for a potential dealer to go and visit. I think it'll do just fine for them.
What I will say is, dealers out there, just and Kiedis, if you're hearing this, I love you, I love your work, but I feel like the sweary, shouty, a slightly offensive thing now, it's probably reached its. We don't need any more dealers doing it. It's not done. It's not done.
No.
But it's. I think we can't just go and copy. Think of something a little different, perhaps. I think the Portage one, they've gone a little bit nicer, a bit more, a bit more kind of humour, and I think that's worked really well. But yeah, unless Kiedis is doing this for you, because he's pretty good at nailing the tone, then maybe think twice before just going ahead and copying what he's up to. So yeah,
that's actually a good point. It's not for me. Like, this isn't my style of commercial. But I respect others' choice to go and do so. But here's the risk, is that Kiedis' work has been quite successful. And we're going to get a whole lot of dealers around the country thinking, I could do that. But to do that, I've got to be a little bit stronger, a little bit more edgy. It is a bit of a race going on, I suspect. And so I take on board your point. This might be the kind of the finish line of that particular race when it comes to just how far you can push these things.
Yeah.
Time to ease back.
Exactly. Now, talking about easing back, Hayward Group is to give customers choice over the clean car standard. Hayward Auto Group, the parent company of Hayward Auto, Enhanced Auto Portal and Auto Solution, have changed their plans for customers around the clean car standard, saying in a statement today they've withdrawn plans to cover all CCS obligations for their customers. The group had initially indicated they would handle all CCS obligations for customers, but say they have reviewed the situation and changed tack. To quote from the statement, after much customer feedback, further review of CO2 data of vehicles we are supplying to New Zealand, future CO2 grams per kilometre target challenges, and now the potential continuation of CCS under any future NZ government, Hayward Auto has reluctantly decided to withdraw its CCS management policy. Our desire to help all group customers with what we propose was the main driver for the policy. However, with the above being considered, this would likely be an overcommitment on our behalf and disadvantageous to some customers. Hayward's logistics subsidiary AutoHub says it will now offer clients two opt-in systems. The first option is for AutoHub to manage CCS obligations on vehicles they are shipping. No matter who or where your stock comes from, AutoHub will use its own pay-as-you-go CO2 account, invoice the customers for penalties, and hold credits on for offsetting the customer's own penalties. So they're not going to be pooling the credits there. Alternately, if the customer wants to manage their own CO2 account, AutoHub will upload data for vehicles into Waka Kotahi systems, and they will appear on the customer's own CO2 account. It's interesting, I believe the import and trade has moved fairly fast to get these things set up. I believe Nichibo is in a similar position. You go into Nichibo, you register your CO2 account, and they do the uploading for you. I don't want to get too much into this thing because it is a fairly complicated situation, Graham, but I feel this is probably the right decision. I think dealers' individual model mix choices need to be acknowledged in this. Well, I think for some, the ability to just not have to deal with it was nice. It is just a bit complex depending on what you put on your yard, isn't it?
Yeah, like when the policy first came out, I don't want to give AutoHub and Halo a brickbat over this, but when I first saw the policy announced, I thought, ooh, I'm not so sure about that one. Nice try. And look, it was probably with the right sort of intention, but it ain't going to work. I could just see so many fish hooks in already. And an interesting point to this, and it's not just Halo, it is Nicheville, it is some of the biggest stock providers. Any hope the trade have, and there was talk of it saying, well, this is going to weed out the rats and mice traders, the guys that just buy 1 or 2 vehicles a year and they're bugging up for the rest of us because they're not worried about having a business and they're selling off Facebook Marketplace. Remember that article? Because it was all complex to run your account. Well, clearly that's not going to be the case, because now the Japanese exporters are going to do all that for you, and it means that if you're the guy that buys the 2 or 3 cars a year and sticks them out in your muddy backyard and puts them on Facebook Marketplace, they've got you covered. And for that, I'm a bit, I was kind of hoping it might weed out some of the rats and mice, and it's clearly not going to.
Well, I mean, through both these options, you do essentially have to pay your penalties at least, which hopefully will help.
No, because it takes it out of your hands. I mean, part of it was the complexity, but I've made a point before that the scheme was just complicated enough that for a lot of the smaller importers, it might be that bridge too far, because they're going to have to identify themselves, go through a lot of different processes that were just a bit difficult for them. That's all been taken out of their hands. Someone else does it for you. Pay the penalty, don't pay the penalty, pick up the fee, whatever you need to do. It becomes a lot easier for them, but it doesn't necessarily make it any easier for the dealers like us that are already registered and looking at managing our stock, which was the whole idea behind the scheme in the first place, as I understood it.
Mm-hmm. Now, I have a separate kind of issue with the whole CCS thing at the moment, and that is a warning. It's a warning that David Vinson from VIA included in a story earlier, and that is, don't forget you got to pay for this stuff eventually. So just because... And this was hilarious when some titles ran around proclaiming how this delay was amazing. Just because they've pushed the billing back to June doesn't mean they're not billing you. So make sure you keep a very close eye on your CCS account. Make sure that if you are going into penalty, you start squirreling the money away as straight away. And keep it on it early, because there's the potential that you could shift your buying patterns to reduce any penalties you do have. And I think watching your account is going to be a good way to learn some of that stuff, because I think there's going to be a lot of people who are going to get a letter or an email or a knock on the door from the NZTA in about 6.5 months' time, going, you have a very large bill to pay. And we all know that cash flow next year is probably not going to be that great. So make sure you squirrel away that money for the CCS, or modify your buying patterns to reduce your liability under it prior to that date. Because there's not going to be, even if you do have credit, I think there's going to be a huge amount of liquidity for them initially. I think you're not going to see any liquidity for those for a little bit of time to come. No. Certainly not until there's systems in place that allow for it. So save that money. We don't want any of our lovely listeners getting into real trouble when the NZTA, and I'm not sure they're going to pass the billing on to, who come knocking for their money in 6.5 months' time.
I mean, that was a bullshit call to start with. Pushing it out and saying it was a win was a win for nobody, as far as I could work it out. And I'd also argue that if you're the sort that has got no intention of paying your bill at the end of it, at your 6.5 months, you're probably not watching this show either, because you're under the radar as it is. There's going to be, you just know there are people that are already figuring out how they're going to liquidate their businesses come June or July and just pop up somewhere else. The cousin, the brother, the auntie, the whatever. I mean, look, honestly, our trade has a pretty piss-poor track record of being able to sort of manage the bottom end of these sort of things without vanishing off into the sunset, leaving liabilities and carrying on. And the same will happen now. It just is longer for them to either game the system or get themselves into terrible trouble.
The delay is not bad for the delay is not bad for everyone. Those operations that do forward plan and do other things could basically use that time to settle things down, get themselves into the right position in regards to what they're importing, and bring that penalty down to nothing. But it could also be a trap for players. So it's not a bad thing, but it is potentially a trap for those who don't get things right. Now, on to our next couple of stories we'll quickly flick through. AA has promoted Jonathan Sergel to being Chief Mobility Officer. I do not know what a Chief Mobility Officer is, so let's see.
That.
Yeah, the New Zealand Automobile Association has announced a new role for the organisation, appointing former Motoring Services General Manager Jonathan Sergel as its new Chief Mobility Officer. His new role will oversee the increasing use of sustainable mobility options by AA members. Sergel will be supported by Driving School and Government Contracts Manager Rod Javern, Roadside Solutions General Manager Bashir Khan, and Acting Motor Services General Manager Kyle Lincoln. Kiwis always see us as a place for trusted information on all things motoring, and we want to keep building on the relationship that already exists and extend this into mobility, Sergel says. Mobility today and mobility in the space of a few months, a year, or even 5 years will be a completely different environment, and it's only going to evolve more and more rapidly. My role will be to make sure that our members and all New Zealanders are able to keep pace with that change with all the information that they need at their fingertips. So, I think mobility is changing. Perhaps the AA is forecasting for the future peak car and they're trying to spread things across other areas, or there's obviously new services that need to be accounted for with electric vehicles. And I guess they're wanting to cover this off. I'm not sure why he couldn't have done that in the motoring services role, but I'm sure they have their reasons for it. An electric car is still a car. Yeah.
Yes, that's a good point. I don't know either. I read the story and I wasn't quite sure what the role actually entailed that the previous role that Jonathan held didn't already deliver. But like you say, I'm sure there's a plan there somewhere.
My question, one of the areas perhaps that could be relevant to the situation is, of course, the good development of the AA certified dealer network, and I do know that sometimes that there were elements of that do sort of clash with the association's involvement in vehicle certification and vehicle inspections, and perhaps that is a way also to separate that off as well. We'll see how that one goes. Should be an interesting one. The next story is the MTA. Well, look, with the MTAs here, we've got a couple of stories on this, but the industry has welcomed the addition of motor mechanics to the Green List. The Motor Trade Association sees the decision to add skilled motor mechanics to the immigration Green List from March 2023 as a massive boost for an automotive industry battling a crippling labour shortage. Immigration Minister Michael Wood confirmed the addition of most skilled motor mechanics to the Green List on December 12. He acknowledged listening to the concerns of these sectors and working with them to take practical steps to unlock additional labour to help fill skills gaps as businesses work towards more productive and resilient ways of operating. At the start of November, Trade had more than 1,300 job listings in the automotive industry, while SEEK had 1,500. The majority for motor mechanics also refer to the industry as automotive technicians. This just shows how dire the shortage is, Pike says. It's been a number one issue keeping MTA members awake at night for some time. Now, my suggestion here is that this is a great thing for the industry. I'm not saying it's not, but I also believe it is a bit of a wake-up call time because I'm not sure that they will keep extending this out. And there's the great argument that you can't go and produce and train technician overnight. No, it takes many years. And I think the obligation by being given this access is the industry is to start thinking now about who it needs in 5 to 10 years time. And I think if you take on one of these green list technicians, sorry, I've got a snorting dog in here, then you probably are under the obligation to, if you can afford it, take on an apprentice, or at least look at taking on an apprentice. The industry really does need to double down on its efforts to train locally for the future. I know it is not a free thing to do, but there is strong support from Maito and the likes of the MTA to bring those people up. I think if the shortage is that desperate, we need to go on a critical list to import them from overseas. then you really should start thinking about your role in developing the people of the future. I guess this probably applies to the bigger franchises out there, the bigger workshops, but that's kind of my personal call to the industry that, you've been given this band-aid, but it's your turn to help fix the solution. I know it's not that complicated, not that simple. It's more complicated than that, but I think we certainly need to try. Am I on the right path there, Graham, or do you think I'm totally wrong?
Oh, well, there's elements of what you say that I think are correct. I was going to say, it appears to me there's been a whole lot of listening done and not a whole lot of doing. If they'd spent the last 6 months not listening, but actually doing this stuff, we wouldn't be in a position now. We'd argue it's already not quite too late, but the industry's certainly been suffering for a lack of skilled service technicians and mechanics and others that could have been dealt with quite some time ago. Because even with a green light happening early next year, the time frame it'll take to actually attract those people and get them into New Zealand, get them domiciled and get them up to speed, we're looking probably late 2023 at the very earliest before there'll be any tangible benefit to the industry out of this.
I actually think it's slightly different than that. So I think in this case, there's a lot of technicians who are here who otherwise would have had to have gone back offshore. So the early thing in this will be mitigating the departures. But yeah, look, I'm not suggesting you could have fixed anything in 6 months. I think it takes probably 5+ years to fully train a technician. It is a very, very detailed, skill base, and that's what I'm saying is that now let's get a few more apprentices in the door. Work with Mito to train that technician of the future, rather than having to go to the expense of bringing one in from overseas in 5 years' time, which you probably will have to do. Because
I was going to say, where are they?
Yeah,
we've got a shortage of able bodies out there anyway, including the potential store leaders coming on through. And this is one of the central issues facing New Zealand around inflationary pressures. It's not just money, it's people.
Mm-hmm. I think there could be opportunities out there at the moment. I think we could start seeing people coming out of the building trade as things quieten down in that space, though there's shortages there as well. But look, there are interested people out there, and if they can be offered the right packages and the right training, they will come through, and they will be valuable assets in the future. Because particularly, any service manager or dealer principal in the new vehicle trade, or to a lesser extent the used vehicle trade, knows the commercial value of a fully trained technician.
Yeah.
And while it may seem like a simple solution to get someone in from overseas, under the systems, they're generally not going to be any cheaper. The rates that are required, they actually generally have to be paid more than a local technician. And the immigration costs and the acquisition costs for these staff are massive. And I would argue whether you get better value out of putting in a long-term and a stressed long-term project to bring in to train new apprentices. That's my take on it. Now, in a similar vein, Eagers Automotive is celebrating emerging and advanced leaders. Eagers Automotive New Zealand has congratulated 13 team members who graduated from its 2022 Emerging Leaders and Advanced Leadership Program. The company extended a special congratulations to its good to great winners of 2022 at a graduation ceremony held in November at the Cornwall Park Bistro. Manukau Hyundai brand manager Les Bygate took out the award for the Advanced Leaders Program. The Emerging Leaders Program had 2 winners this year, with Auckland Mitsubishi Motors Service Advisor, and I'm sorry if I get this name wrong, Zubin Palsetia, and Senior Group Wholesale Coordinator and Buyer Anthony Smith taking out this award. Eagers Automotive says its program consists of 2 courses: the Emerging Leaders Program, which is designed for staff in the early stages of their leadership journey, and the Advanced Leaders Program, which supports employees who are further down the managerial track. It says the program not only teaches transferable leadership skills, but encourages out-of-the-box strategic thinking designed to challenge potential processes. Both programs will require staff to attend regular workshops in addition to completing projects in which they implement progressive change into the business. Graduating from the program is no easy feat, considering this is run on top of their existing workloads with the company. And I'm going to go back to my rant from last week. Myself and the broader Automedia group is passionate about ongoing professional development. It's one of the reasons we started AutoTalk Live, and I think it's great to see this kind of stuff happening. We can be better as a trade, and that comes from within, and we need to keep training our people. That's my take. Yeah.
I can't add anything better to that, Richard. You're right. We agree.
Yes. We agree. We agree. We agree. Yes. And for those that say, well, we can't do that, we're not a big corporate. Well, again, go look up the Mitre.org.nz, I believe. They do actually have management courses for dealerships and various other things that are there. Highly recommend. And yeah, let's just be better. It pays off in the future. It's you learn these things and then you get incremental gain, and incremental gain really adds up. And also, people who are well trained and understand the proper aspects of selling vehicles rather than just selling fridges. Generally, you're going to get less trips to the disputes tribunal. You get happier customers. It's all worthwhile. Right. Thank you very much for joining us again. Thank you very much for joining us, Graham. I think we've got with the headphones on this time. The sound's so much better.
Dulcet tones and stereo.
Yeah. We got a little bit of tweaking to do around that, but at least we've got one piece of equipment working. That's a big step forward for us. Don't forget to like and subscribe this video wherever you're watching. Don't forget you can listen to this now as a podcast and forward it on to your mates. The more people get watching this, the better. We love to share a bit of opinion and candor and some hot takes from our offices in Mangawhai and West Auckland. Right.
Hey, are we going to push this out on Christmas on the 23rd? We're going to have one last show.
Yeah, I think we should. I think we should squeeze one more out if you're up for it, Grant.
Christmas wrap. Yeah, I'm up to it. Absolutely.
Yeah,
you never know. You might have some more bad boys doing bad things to talk about in the news. Everyone loves a bad news story, right?
Well, I think the politicians and judges are on holiday now, so I can't really see that happening. But and maybe I don't know. I can convince you to do one or two over the summer break as well. For maybe we talk about some entirely non-industry BS. Right.
Could do. All right.
Exactly.
Happy trails, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Right.
The weather up here in Auckland is pretty awful, I think, for the duration. So if that's the case, hunker down, get your sales team some good raincoats and umbrellas, and hopefully there's some good pre-Christmas business to be had.
Right. Catch you around next week.